is lengthy and quite dense. So I'm going to try something different from my usual pattern of reading you the text and then giving a sermon. I'm going to read a chunk, unpack it a bit, and then read another chunk, and we'll just sort of hack our way through these 40 verses. Because otherwise, I'd be halfway through reading the text, and y'all be like, well, that was nice, I'm going to take a nap. So, let's get through this. The Holy Gospel according to St. John.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus left Judea and started back to Galilee. So, but he had to go through Samaria. So he came to the Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the well. It was about noon. So, the last time that we were told what time of day it was nighttime. Chapter 3, Nicodemus shows up. He comes to Jesus by night. Now, Nicodemus is sort of a side character in the gospel, but he's named. He shows up to Jesus by night, and John has been making this huge to-do about people living in darkness and the light coming into the world. And I don't know if any of you have ever been awake at nighttime, but it's dark. At noontime, the sun is out, it's bright, there's not even shadows being cast. So we should be having this story of Nicodemus springing to mind. It's like, oh wait, Nicodemus came at night. So if someone's about to show up, which they are, we should be impressed by this person and the encounter they have. Oh, by the way, also, Nicodemus totally never got it. He shows up to Jesus like, well, we know you're from God. And then Jesus starts talking, and Nicodemus is like, huh? What? I don't get it. He is clueless. Nighttime, right? So, it's noon. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, give me a drink. His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, how is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria? Jews do not share things in common with the Samaritans. Jesus answered, if you knew the gift of God and who it is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. The woman said to him, sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us the well, and with his sons and his flocks drank from it? Jesus said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I give will become in them the spring of water gushing to eternal life. The woman said to him, sir, give me this water so that I may never be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw water. So, Jesus asked this woman for a drink of water, right? And she's like, whoa, 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 you are a Jew and I am a Samaritan. You can't ask me that, and then John tells us, Jews and Samaritans didn't share things in common, which is not quite true. It turns out that the Jews and the Samaritans both worshipped Yahweh. They both trace their ancestry to Jacob and the 12 tribes of Israel, and Isaac and Abraham, and so on and so forth. In fact, they basically had the same religion. That'd be us like saying, whoa, we can't talk to Methodists. We're Lutherans. So what the problem goes back to is, after King Solomon, the kingdom of Israel split into two. There was the southern kingdom of Judea, and then the other 10 tribes were in the north. And the split in part came over the southern king saying, well, if you want to go to the temple, you have to come to Jerusalem. You can't worship near your houses. You got to come here. And they were like, whoa, we don't want to walk 2 weeks to church. We'll never get anything else done. So, and there was taxes and building programs. It was more complicated than that. But we have this split in the kingdoms. And then, in the 700s BC, the northern kingdom was conquered by the Assyrians. And what the Assyrians did when they conquered a nation was they deported most of the people, and then they resettled other people. And 200 years later-ish, the southern kingdom was conquered by the Babylonians. The Babylonians would just take the cream of the crop, while all the educated people, take them to their capital city, have them work for them, but they wouldn't resettle the land. And so eventually, when the elite from the southern kingdom got to go back to Judea, they had this whole thing about they were the true, pure strain of Israel, and anybody who had been left in the land had probably bred with outsiders, so they were of mixed blood, and so they were bad and outsiders. And eventually they came around a little bit and said, well, the people who were left in Judea, they're okay, but the Samaritans, they have definitely bred with people who aren't directly descended from Abraham, so we can't associate with them. And that's this whole divide, is really just silly semantics over ancestry. And Jesus doesn't dwell on that at all. But that's part of this big tension. The disciples are going to show up in a bit, and they're going to be like, whoa, what is he doing talking to her? But from there, Jesus just pushes through and blows it up to this universal thing in this whole bit about eternal life, right? He's like, I'll give you water that has, you'll never be thirsty again. And things don't become, this mundane, shallow bit that we tend to dwell in. And the other thing that I need to say before we go on is this woman. We're about to read, actually, let's see what Jesus says to her. Jesus said to her, so she just asked for the water. And Jesus said to her, go, call your husband and come back. The woman answered him, I have no husband. Jesus said to her, you are right in saying, I have no husband, for you've had 5 of them. And the one who you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true. The woman said to him, Sir, I see you're a prophet. Our ancestors worship on this mountain, but you say the place where people must worship is in Jerusalem. Jesus said to her, Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will worship the Father, neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming, and is now here, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father seeks such as these to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. The woman said to him, I know the Messiah is coming, which is called Christ. When he comes, he will proclaim all things to us. Jesus said to her, I am he, the one who is speaking to you. This woman has often, who, by the way, doesn't get a name in this story. This woman who never gets a name has, for a good chunk of history, been said to be some sort of promiscuous woman, some sort of harlotry. But the text never tells us that. It just says that Jesus says she's had 5 husbands, and the one you're living with now isn't your husband. Now we could read this and be like, whoa, girl gets around. Or we could see her as a victim of a society that demands that men are in charge. Because if you're a woman living on your own, you know what you don't have? Anything. You don't have security. You're not seen as a citizen. You're probably just scraping by. So maybe this is a woman who's just been abused and pushed from house to house to house, and no one's actually seen her or given her dignity. Now, the other thing that's playing in the background of this story is that Jesus has met her at a well. Every other time a man meets a woman at the well in the Bible, like Moses or Jacob or Isaac, they get married to them. Now, of course, we know that Jesus doesn't end up marrying this woman. Otherwise, I'm sure they would have told us her name, and told us they got married. But they don't get married. But that's playing in the background of this. This woman who's been pushed from place to place to place, probably seeking some sort of security. Jesus is meeting her in this, stock story. It's like the romantic comedy where, two people bump into each other on the street. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. And then the movie's about them falling in love. That's what we've got here. This is like a great encounter for these two. And the whole thing blasts back way up into the atmosphere, and it's about worship and who to worship and worshiping God in spirit and truth. Figure that one out, and you can have my job. But part of what I think is happening in this spirit and truth and worshiping God and this thing that Jesus is talking about is that our lives are no longer about specific locations. God and this water that we won't ever be thirsty from again, doesn't get nailed down to these tiny specific things like who was our ancestor, or if our church is on a mountain in Samaria, or in Jerusalem, or Orfordville, or I don't know, when you're plowing your fields and you appreciate the beauty of God's creation, or when you have a great meal and you're like, wow, God's creation tastes great. God can be worshipped anywhere, because Christ isn't just present at nighttime with Nicodemus, or on a cross, or in an empty tomb, or at a well. It turns out that God is everywhere. Christ comes to walk with us everywhere. Even if we're bounced around from place to place, too. If we feel insecure about where we are and we're just seeking some sort of recognition in society or security under somebody, Jesus comes to give us that security. Comes to say that each of us matters. Comes to say that your identity isn't based on who your husband or your wife or your job or your income status is or what car you drive. Our identity ends up in Jesus, which means that we're free to be who we are. Just then, his disciples came. They were astonished that he was speaking to a woman. But no one said, "What do you want?" Or "Why are you speaking to her?" Then the woman left. She left her water jar and went back to the city. She said to the people, "Come and see the man who told me everything I've ever done. He cannot be the Messiah, can he?" They left the city and went on their way to him. This woman shows up back in the city where she's probably not overly respected. People maybe know who she is. And she starts asking questions in public. And people run in droves, right? She's like, he can't be the Messiah, can he? You would expect the town to empty out. And you're like, everybody, God is right over there. Let's go. If someone tells me, hey, God's a half mile out of town, I'll go a half mile out of town. Say some guy's going to, fill up your jug so that you never have to go back to the well and, you ever carried water? Even when I go to a campground and, I fill up, a little 1-gallon jug of water and I have to carry, an eighth of a mile back to my campsite, I'm like, oh, man, what is going on here, right? These people are carrying clay jars filled with water, too, right? She could have said, this guy's got eternal water, you'll never be thirsty again. They go out for that, right? But she doesn't do that. She says, he can't be the Messiah, can he? Her question is incredibly powerful. Now, Nicodemus, when he showed up at nighttime, he says to Jesus, well, we know that you're a teacher from God. Because no one could do these signs apart from the presence of God. He shows up and he just states something clearly, this is the way it is. And he totally doesn't get it. But this woman, and who she is and the way she behaves at noontime,